Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So, we've had two panels today, and on those, I am so happy to have multiple guests, the ability to, the ability to sort of move through um, what we're, different topics, different concepts. But here, I like the chance to sit down with one creator and to talk about their work in depth. So today we are incredibly fortunate to have Kristina Luu with us, the creator of Intercosmic. Say hello, Kristina.
Hi, guys. I'm Christina. Very nice to meet you, and I'm super excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. My name is Kevin Wilson. I am the designer in Hiveworks and doing juggling a whole bunch of other cats as well. And my pronouns are he, him. And what pronouns do you have, Christina?
I go by she, her.
Awesome. Awesome. And so, how you doing today?
Doing pretty good.
Pretty good?
It's been, I'm always surprisingly busy on Saturdays. I don't know what it is about it. Like, I'm always like, the rest of my week is free, and then Saturdays, it's like, bam, bam, bam. Always everything on one day. But it's been a pretty good day so far.
Good.
It's nice and sunny where I'm at, so I'm looking out the window lovingly.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And
but I'm excited to be here.
good, 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 good. I'm excited for you to be here. Like, um, when I was building Intercosmic's website, there was a lot that I saw in it. Even just the sample pages that you sent over so that I could design with them.
Mhm.
But it was really engaging, and when I build sites, more often than not, I like to read through as much of the comic as I can, to get a
Mhm.
sense of, because some comics will pull a twist on you, and or their tone isn't immediately readable. With Intercosmic, one thing that I really loved was uh, how I could get a sense of the story. Doesn't mean that I got a sense of the details, that I knew everything, but I could feel what was happening, what was going to happen pretty well. Um, and the, I think that it really made me want to ask you a bunch of questions. So I'm so happy that you're here. Like,
Ah.
so to start for people who don't know Intercosmic, can you give me at least the maybe like an elevator pitch or what you tell people when they ask, like, what is your comic about?
Okay. Well, long story short, Intercosmic is about some rainbow space people and space gods who inadvertently kind of have to adopt a human child. It's kind of like an end of the apocalypse. It's a post-apocalypse, but not really. It's um, they have to adopt this human child, and the child really wants to find her way home. And so now these rainbow god people are kind of like, oh my god, how do we take care of this child and bring her back to her family? So that's the entire like spiel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the short story, and it focuses on three main characters. I love elemental tropes, so of course, the gods are all based on different elements and colors, and it's kind of like a sci-fi fantasy found family romp. And yeah, that's kind of it. That's my comic
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in a
And
nutshell.
one of the things that I wanted to touch on while we talk is, I mean, we've there's many reasons why we wanted you, why I wanted to interview you for this stream, and one of them is the way in which you handle queer content in Intercosmic and how it's woven in, because so many of your characters are not human, and so their concept of what queerness is going to be very different than like human society. And also the human that you do have in there, um your human character is from a culture that is, if I'm right, it's very far in the future, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So how did you go about like figuring out, how you would put it in, how the every character would sort of think about it, how they would conceptualize it?
Ooh, okay. So, Intercosmic actually started off like when I first wanted to write this, it was going to be like 100 pages. That's what I said. Funny story. All right, don't we
Common,
all do that?
yep, common
Like
story.
it's like, oh, I'm gonna make a short story. It'll be great. Obviously that didn't happen.
Hmm.
And the entire idea of Intercosmic was the idea that I just wanted to make. I mean, I think a lot of, especially younger queer creators these days, very much want to just make the stuff you want to see in the world, right? Like we just want to make stuff that it's like just part of the world. It's not the focus. It's not the, I don't know. As much as I, don't get me wrong, I love a good LGBT romance. Like, don't get me wrong. I love that stuff. But
Yeah.
I was like, why? I kind of want to make a story where, I don't know, the characters just kind of are and it's not the focus, like it's not the focal point. I remember having a discussion about something similar like this, about having Asian characters in this like weird, totally different setting. And it's not a story about them being Asian. It's not a story about them being necessarily like gay or queer or in love with someone. It's
Yeah.
kind of like something like it's just part of the world. It's just is. And I really wanted to make something like that. So that's kind of how Intercosmic came about. I was like, huh, I just want to make a fun elemental story. Rainbow people, like maybe they're just girlfriends on the side. These two characters are very obviously in love with each other. Like that's not even questionable.
Hmm.
That's really how it came about. And then making it has just been kind of this really fun journey of how do I say it? I think everyone can say that, you know, the stuff we make, we kind of project onto it, right? So
Yeah.
I made this comic when I was in like college, middle of college. I mean, the idea and the story and the world and everything is honestly dates back to my childhood. I've had very specific tastes for a really long time. um, yeah, and then I just kind of like you know when you're in college, I went to all girls private school prior to art school, so going to art school was just like suddenly I was surrounded, and everyone around me was like so free to express themselves, so like wonderful, vibrant people who are all like, you know, exploring themselves too, figuring themselves out. Some people I knew were very confident with their queer identity. And then I myself was, I knew I was queer while I was in high school, but it was never something I really wanted to face myself or accept.
Yeah.
Um, and so coming to school was like, oh my God, everybody's like so proud of it. Why can't I do that too? So that's kind of where this came about. Like I just wanted to make something that was like true to me and just fun. Like, you know, like I was just like, why don't I just make a fun story about these rainbow space people? And I will admit, when I first made the story, obviously the romance was a lot more heavy. It was a lot more important. A lot more of those elements were, you know, very integral to like making the story. But then as I developed it further, I kind of realized, like, even as my own identity as like a queer person, I was like, I don't necessarily want that as like a focus on even just myself, you know, like I want that just to be a part of me. And I don't want that to be like the poster reason why I'm on the front face of everything, if that makes sense. Like, it's not
No, it totally does.
yeah, it's like not the focus of my identity. It's just a part of who I am. And so that's kind of where this came about. It's kind of where I kind of started making the comic and I was like, you know what? I just want it to be part of this world. Like, and this whole world, the entire spoiler, not that I really care, but the the kind of entire idea of this world is that it's entirely built on love and that can be defined in so many ways, whether it's the way these two characters feel about each other or even just the foundation of a good solid friendship and found family. So that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was going. It's a very abstract topic. It's like, oh my God, this entire world is powered by quote unquote gay love or love.
Well, I
It
mean,
sounds very wishy washy, but
no,
that's
no,
kind of what I was doing.
but like, I mean, how long have you had this story or elements of this story in your head?
Oh my God. Honestly, if you really want to go back, like I have actually I found recently that there were some old drawings I put on Tumblr from
Uh-huh.
like 2014, I believe, where I had like
2014?
these yeah, these fire and ice elementals and they were like partners. And then the like really old stuff, if you really want to dig into it, is like as far back as when I was 11 or 12. I had an OC named Maya. Surprise, that's now my main character.
Got you.
And a lot of these elements have kind of just been like tidbits here and there. Obviously, the story for Intercosmic itself is it kind of just came about when I was in college when I actually put the pieces together. But
Hmm.
these like individual elements, like the story of like a fire and ice elemental working together and being partners, has been in my head for oh my god. If you say at this point, if I say 12, that's 10 years.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah.
when you talk about something that you've had in your head brewing for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times in interviews you'll hear from creators where someone asks them what inspired this, and
Mm-hmm.
the question is set up in such a way that it assumes that there's like one thing where,
Yeah.
like you're eating a really good hot dog and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna
Yeah.
make a comic. When really it's for a lot of people, not everyone, but for a lot of people, I think it's a really long process and a lot of different inspirations. So
Mm-hmm.
hearing about how, you had a name that you've kept, that to me doesn't mean that you are unoriginal at all. It just means that that name won. Like it was appropriate. And, I've made things where an element of it withstands, tests and critiques and it fits. And,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it just works and you don't, even if you try to change it, it becomes something you don't like anymore. And so you just go back. And,
Mm-hmm.
but hearing about this inspiration, this long running process, and how that fit into your growth as a person, because if you had this when you were 12 and you've been moving through this for this long, there's a lot of change that happens, over those years since you were 12. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact that one that it survived, I mean, there's lots of stuff that I wanted to do when I was 12 that
Mm-hmm.
absolutely disappeared. The fact that it was like refined like a gem and it is really cool. And like, can you talk a little bit about that, about how this story changed, not just in Intercosmic right now? Like, you can go to the first story at the beginning and see that romance part that slowly blends into a broader concept of what love is, or like how love is
Mm-hmm.
depicted in your story. Are there
Mm-hmm.
things that we can't see that were there before? Like, were you like, all right, this one is, was there like a version of Intercosmic where like it was like a horror story or something?
Yes. I actually remember when I was like drafting the idea of Intercosmic. So, fun story. I actually made a lot of Intercosmic when I was in second year, specifically of college.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, I was really unhappy, just
Oh
going through a lot
no.
of stuff, figuring out a lot of things. And also, I was actually suffering from a very heavy RSI. So,
Oh
that's a repetitive
wow.
strain injury. So I had a very big arm injury that basically took me out of like I was still in school,
Uh
but
huh.
I couldn't really do any of my assignments for the like solid 8 months I was there. It was a very slow process. Like I would still hand in work, but it would be like I get like 2 month extension and I'd
Oh
work
my
on it very
gosh.
slowly. Yeah, yeah. So that's honestly when I was like, I can't draw. I need to do something else with my spare time or I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of it's not something I talk about often. I don't really talk about my experience with chronic pain or like that kind of thing because I still live with it to this day, but
Mm-hmm.
I've just found a more balanceable way to handle it. But it's not something I talk about just because I guess I just never felt like it, but I feel like it's an important topic.
It is.
Um, yeah, so while I was in that stage, I was just like, going through a lot of stuff. Like, I was kind of debating, what am I doing with my life if I can't draw? Like, I made art my life, my hobby. I want to create. And so I poured a lot of that into making this comic. Honestly, the reason why I think Intercosmic even exists is because I needed such a drive to do something else with myself.
Yeah.
So when I first wrote it, it was like kind of dark. Which is kind of funny when you look at it. You're like, look at these rainbow space people. They look so cute. And I remember looking at my first drafts, like even just recently, looking at what I wrote as an outline. And I was like, oh, this is sad.
Yeah.
Not necessarily tragic. I am not a fan of, I mean, obviously, the bury your gays trope, not a good thing. I don't like it. I don't. I mean, obviously, I think we can have very cool, edgy LGBT stuff, but if it's the only character in a series and they're going to have a tragic ending, like, come on.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that. But yeah, it was just like a very, like, I guess, highly emotional story. And I was like, later as I made it and I started actually creating the comic, this was outside of writing, it became something, a lot more bright, cheery, fun, more like me just having a good time creating and less about, trying to cope with something that was really affecting my life. So yeah, there are versions of this where it's dark. And if I think of like the first way, like you guys are gonna laugh at me or something, but like
No.
if I really want to think about the very first origin of this story, it's maybe like two steps removed from being Adventure Time fan fiction when I was 12.
Well, that's not bad though. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, the I think having, I mean, again, you're talking about when you were 12, and
Yeah.
there's, I mean, my own personal philosophy is that, uh, you, if you dig into my work, you can really tell. I mean, if I start telling you my influences, you can see it, and because you can see where I'm pulling from in different ways.
Yes,
I've
yes.
just gotten enough different things that it's kind of harder to tell the one influence.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
but that doesn't, even if someone just read one book and then made
Mhm.
their own book, I still think that that's great. And
Oh, absolutely.
it does make it a little bit harder to make sure that you are distinct. But like, there is a lot of projects I've heard of where people hate read a thing and then make the better version. And
Yes.
like that's made some really great work. And
Hmm. Hmm.
so starting from that foundation, that makes sense. Is it okay if I ask a question about that in particular, the Adventure Time
Oh,
fanfiction?
sure. Go for it.
Um, from that base, where did you think
Yeah.
you went now? Like,
Oh my God. Okay, fun thing. So I remember watching season 5 of Adventure Time, and I think it was like the finale. And it was like a really, like, I don't know, quote unquote, dark and edgy finale where, like, I guess Finn has like the ice crown and he goes crazy.
yeah.
So I remember as a kid, I was like, oh my God, I love the idea of this kind of like ice prince that goes bonkers and tries to freeze the world.
Hmm.
So that's where it kind of took off. Like I remember creating these OCs where this girl has to like reunite the last fire elemental with this crazy ice prince to stop the world from freezing over. That's where it started. And I made the story when I was 12. I wish I could show some art for it, but it's so far hidden in my folder somewhere that I cannot possibly, like, unless I dug through that storage in my house, it's somewhere down there.
Well, that's a
And
later Easter egg at some point, maybe.
yeah, yeah. And then, honestly, I didn't touch it for a long time. Art was always something I kind of like, I just did it for fun on the side. I
Hmm.
doodled in between my homework. And then when art school came around, I remember I had to do an assignment where it was like, make these contrasting characters. And it was my second year assignment. And so I remember when it was in the middle of this time that I was like, I need something to distract myself with. And so that's when I started, what if I made a comic? And then this assignment came around, and I was like, oh my God, I should design those characters I made up when I was 11. Like these two characters, their names were different at the time.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
joke about that. You heard Maya. The other one was named Isric, and the other one was named Embrin. So those were my three original OCs, and
Hmm.
then I redesigned them for homework. And then I was like, oh, I really like this. I want to keep going. And then it really did just take off from there. I started doing these taking these characters and doing them in other assignments. And then next thing you know, I've made a thesis film about it. I blink and it's like now everything I've done for the past 4 years has been around the same thing. But I mean, I don't regret it. It's been a good time.
Absolutely. And to go back to something you said earlier, I think it's different. So I don't mean to equate them completely, but living with chronic pain and your identity, I mean, that's a part of identity in a way of
Yes.
like, I have some friends who have chronic pain, and it is hard to talk to people about it.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and the same way that like when you talk about your identity, there are some people that even if their intentions are amazing, it's
Mhm.
not fun to talk to them about your
Oh,
identity,
absolutely.
especially if you're in a vulnerable place. And
Absolutely.
um, so it feels like, chronic pain, your experience with queerness, there's a lot that is in this pot
Hmm.
before Intercosmic as we see it when we read it now starts. Um, can you talk about how that is shown through the work, if that's okay?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, okay, the biggest thing is I have made this comic to be something purely, completely indulgent for me. So I have made it one of my absolute goals, especially with this comic, is to make it something I love making, make it something I enjoy so much. A lot of it feels like I'm paying an homage to a younger self of I mean, you guys heard all that like deep lore. Like I've had these characters for a long time. I obviously love them. Like I love
Yeah.
making stuff about it. It's tropey, it's kind of campy, but heck, like yeah, I love it. And that's something I really wanted to cherish. Even with my own like confusion with like dealing with the chronic pain, I was like, I want this to be an experience I don't look back on and hate. I don't
Hmm.
want to look back on this comic and think I was in pain the whole time making it.
Yeah.
I want to look back and think that this was something that helped me get through it. This was a really fun project for me to pour a lot of weird ideas and revisit something old.
Hmm.
And so like even when I was coming to term and discovering myself as like my own queer identity, and like I came out as bisexual to my family, it was like a whole experience, especially when you live as like I'm Vietnamese. Should brief as if you guys don't know, Vietnam. I lived in Vietnam for 10 years, and then I moved to Canada, went to all girls school directly from that, and then
Wow.
moved to art school. So I went from like a really like I don't know, very small bubble and a very specific way of life into a like art school where everyone was kind of everything, and I was like, oh my god, this is crazy. Like I had
Yeah.
to revise I've revised my whole world multiple times, and I'm constantly doing that to this day. But so having this comic where I could just explore those feelings and also I don't know, have just joy in was so important to me. And I also think like in my experience, when I was reshaping this world, even as I created it, as I was writing the story or the characters, or and the idea of that maybe the main character's dynamic isn't the focus point. It was my own like understanding of like even just queer media. I was getting really tired of seeing like as I was, coming to like understand my own taste and like realizing that I really loved more woo content out there. I noticed that, there is like there's too much LGBT stuff that focuses on main romance. I want it just to feel like a part of my life
Yeah.
because I am not someone who goes around dating a lot. I'm just
Yeah.
not. And it's not a big part of my life. So why does it have to be a big part of this thing I'm making?
Yeah.
And I just wanted it to be like another facet, like a nice little, part of the world, like a thread woven in that's beautiful, part of another larger tapestry.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what my experience has been like. And oh gosh, oh my god, I went on a tangent there.
Oh no. No, that's part of what I like about doing these interviews and one-on-one is because on a panel, when you're talking about a particular subject, you have that focus and you can keep coming back to it. But in a lot of conversations, they move where they go. And you're talking about how you've made this thing. It's lived with you for a long time. Intercosmic has.
Hmm.
These characters have grown and changed, and the way in which you've expressed it, not only with how you make Intercosmic, but also the characters themselves, is very fascinating to me. Um,
Ooh, thank
and
you.
having grown, having experienced, like gaining more experience with repetitive stress injuries,
Hmm.
getting more experience with your queerness, and like that is a lot of stuff to go through in terms of moving from Vietnam to boarding school to all these things, uh, and
Oh.
it's really cool to hear you talk about how you've been thinking about how this comic fits into it. Um,
Hmm.
and I would like to know, like, how is there some rules that you've developed with this over time, or is there something that
Oh,
you've discovered over time that you've now are following, at least for a little bit?
oh yeah. Okay, so my rule again with this comic is it's got to be something I want to look forward to making. I want to make it a positive experience. I know so many creators, even my own friends, who've had that kind of experience where, they want to make a web comic and then they kind of like burn out from it really
Yeah.
quickly. Honestly, I experienced that myself. I mean, Intercosmic is coming out of the dirt again again after like years. This comic came out in 2017, I think, 2016, and
Mm-hmm.
then it was going strong for a year and then I just couldn't do it anymore. It
Yeah.
was like the same experience I had when I got injured. Like I was going crazy and then my arm almost fell off my body and it was like, all
Oh
right, full
no.
stop. Yeah. And it was like I had done the same thing. Like I did that same unhealthy habit with the comic that I did with to myself.
Yeah.
So I was like, I took the comic offline. I just made it myself again. I think one of the biggest things with a lot of people, especially when you're creating, is it's really easy to lose sight of why you're making something
Yeah.
or everyone has experienced this. Every comic creator knows that it's like this really tough balance you've got to find with your work that you do for fun because
Yeah.
art is a weird thing where we love it but we also do it professionally.
Yeah.
um yeah, so I really struggled with that for a long time. And so working on the film, for example, was a great experience. But I was like, I am getting burnt out from working on a film and a comic. I cannot do this.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, oh
And
my
it's a
God, it was.
and it's a lot of the same sort of flow at the same time.
Uh-huh.
Like, while you're working on a film, and we haven't touched this before, but when you say working on a film, what does that mean?
Oh, yes. So last year, when I was in my, not last year, in my last year of college, we have to do a thesis film. I was doing my degree in animation. And I was like, oh, you know what? I want to make like a little short about my webcomic. That'll be so cute. And the most incredible part was I got to partner up with my friend, like one of my really cool friends. His name's Adrian, and he's a music creator right here in BC. He's got really cool credits. He's worked with Cartoon Network, does a lot of indie games. And so we were like, hey, let's make a music video together. That'd be so fun. You do the music, I'll make the visuals for it. It's going to be
Yeah.
great. And then we applied to a really cool creative grant that's called Story Hive, which is run by TELUS, which
Oh,
is a big,
nice.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So they were, and we won. We won one of this huge grant that Story Hive was offering, and so I was like, oh my God, I get to be paid to make a film about my own characters with a friend, and we're just making an AMV of my comic. Holy smokes. Anyways,
Wow.
that's another whole experience on its own. It was a great time. But yeah, because I was like, okay, if I'm getting this grant, I'm gonna make it worth it.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it something I love making, but also like, wow, what an honor it is to be chosen to do that. So I did make it my full-time job essentially, and
Yeah.
because of that, I couldn't really focus on the comic on this at the same time. And I
Yeah.
didn't want to spread myself thin, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean when I say film. That was a whole 8 months of filmmaking. You can now watch the film online if you ever want to. It's on YouTube under
Mm-hmm.
the same name, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So that's the other thing I've done. I've kind of, made these characters in every medium you can think of under the sun.
But that's awesome. And that, I mean, that gives you a lot of experience to draw from.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
but like, back to the earlier point of like working on a film and then making the comic, those are the same thing. Like, in terms of, they're not the exact same thing, but the
Mhm.
process of building them, you're drawing a lot, you're looking at your
Yes.
computer a lot.
Yes.
And the the pro and when you're building your comic, and this is
Mhm.
speaking from my experience, not only having done a comic in the past, but seeing other creators talk about the process,
Mhm.
I sometimes see them think that uh, people who have a lot of experience doing it, it's easier for them to figure this out. But if you don't have a lot of experience making a webcomic, you can think that you are like printing out sheets of paper basically, rather than
Mm.
the process is going to be long and you
Yeah,
need to be flexible enough to adjust it.
absolutely.
And going hard at the beginning can really mess you up.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and
Absolutely. Oh,
is that something that you can relate to when it comes to Intercosmic when you talk about restarting
oh,
it, or?
yes, yes. Okay, I think like one of the sorry, I'm clapping.
No, it's okay.
Um,
It's okay.
uh, I move a lot when I talk.
No, absolutely. Like, get it out. Like, and it's definitely, there's a lot to talk about here when it comes to this project, because it has lasted very long and it's changed its
Mhm.
shape, just as you have over
Yeah,
time.
I think like the biggest thing I think of when I think of webcomics is I think a lot of people will think, I mean, everyone says the same advice, just do it, which is true.
Yeah.
I mean, if you block yourself into this idea of what your webcomic is supposed to look like by the end, I think you're going to pigeonhole yourself into like a weird position where, you're going to change as a person as you make it. You're going to keep growing. Your tastes are going to change. And in a few years, you don't know what's going to happen with life. So, have fun with it. Like it should be something you enjoy creating and also are willing to be flexible with. And for me, the big rules, I think we mentioned like what rules have I settled like made for myself while making. And the biggest rules I've made are one, have fun, two, no edits allowed. No big edits. I'm not allowed to redraw pages.
Got you. I
Um,
see what you mean.
yeah, no, like it's done, Kristina. It's in the past.
Yeah.
Move forward.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like all that stuff I did when I was like what 4 years ago. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I'm drawing differently now. That's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
And the big thing is like have fun. I think was my big thing. Like it's okay if you're not sure if this makes sense. Like oh my, and I feel like a lot of people are a lot better at this than they realize. Like once they have a story in their head, they kind of get how their characters interact or how they flow.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like I don't want to burn out from working on this, so I want it to be fun. Whether that means working on like big batches of pages every like 2 months, like I'll make a page and then I'll be like, all right, not touching this thing for 3 months, bye. Or it's doing it very regularly. Like it depends on the person, but I think that was like the biggest thing for me was understanding that it's going to change and the story is going to change. These characters might change a lot as I keep writing them. These honestly, the characters I have in my latest pages that nobody is seeing yet because they're not released. I've got over 40 pages of buffer.
Oh, that's good.
I
That's super
know.
good.
I am so ahead. It's kind of funny because I'm releasing pages I did 2 years ago now. So it's like, oh yeah, look at these pages.
That's got to
They're
be wild.
oh, it's a funny experience. I'm telling. It's a weird. I think every webcomic artist gets it. It's like a weird thing where you're like, oh, I kind of want to improve these pages, but I'm not gonna. You got to slap your wrist and be like, no, stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, so I've got this huge buffer, but the characters that are in this like latest version is kind of different from what you're currently reading right now. It's kind of interesting because I've been developing them as I go. I'm kind of like, oh, I think it'd be cool if it kind of goes in this direction now instead of what I've like. Obviously, I'm looking back at what I've written and thinking, how can I go from there? But I'm also giving it some room and like room to grow, and I think that has made it a much more positive experience for me in general.
Yeah.
If this was like a graphic novel where you plan out the entire thing, that's different. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
But with webcomics, I feel like it is so important to have that flexibility in mind because you're going to change as you grow work on it. And if it's a quote unquote passion project, keep it that way. Keep it fun. Keep it something you love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like finding that balance is really important. The
Hmm.
balance of your own health, the balance of the
Hmm.
quality of the work, of like,
Hmm.
I this is a pull, but I remember an interview with the people behind Mystery Science Theater and the show where they would crack jokes watching really old movies. And they talked about how they had a lot of conversations of what level of quality they were going to shoot for.
Hmm.
And they knew that they could do like higher quality stuff because all of them are craftspeople. A lot of
Hmm.
them are sculptors. But they had to do so many jokes because those movies are like an hour and a half, like hour long, maybe at best
Yeah.
70 minutes,
Whew.
and they just have to keep cruising.
Mhm.
So they set their bar not as low as they could, but like somewhere around there so that they knew
Mhm.
that they could hit it.
Mhm.
And that's been a problem in my past when it comes to, I mean, design, other projects that I've done, is not being very careful with where I put that quality bar, so that I don't explode.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really cool hearing you talk about that, especially when, you're talking about a project that was out in some form and then
Mhm.
pausing it and then going like something's not working,
Mhm. Oh,
and then
absolutely.
returning. Um, if possible, is okay if I switch and jump over onto another rail real fast?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Go
Perfect.
for it.
Because we've been talking a lot about the what led up to Intercosmic, what
Yes.
where things come from, but I would
Mhm.
like to talk about Intercosmic itself, the characters, and the world that
Yeah.
you've built because I
Ooh.
think it's
Oh.
really engaging. Um,
Thank you.
so now as people are watching this, there's a slideshow going, and a lot of them are going to feature. Would you say that you have three main characters as an ensemble cast? Because you have a lot of
Yeah.
characters.
Oh boy, I have many. It's essentially a cast of ever evolving, just like the same 10, 11 characters.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, am I bad at math? Oh boy, I'm bad at math. It's nine
It's
characters. It's nine evolving characters. It's always going to be the same people.
mm-hmm.
But I would say the main is three. Absolutely. Just like the main three, and the rest are very much like sides that you're going to see like sprinkled in here and there and how they interweave into the plot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And with those three, um, what what is it that because they feel like kind of not the most important characters, but they're definitely the ones that we're following the closest.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And we're getting a sense of their perspective.
Hmm.
As you watch, you will see a character who has very like orange and yellows, and has fire is their theme. There's the
Hmm.
ice one, who has colder colors, and then there's a human who has purples and pinks, and
Hmm.
their names respectively: Sol, the fire themed one; Lunik, the ice themed one; and
Hmm.
Mai, the human.
Hmm.
And with these three characters, um, why are you focusing on those? Like, why are we traveling with them the most?
Okay, so one of my favorite things about just like, I don't know, this is personally me. When I enjoy content, enjoy shows, I really love seeing just like a really solid dynamic, like a really cool, complicated friendship, or I don't know, like those interesting dynamics. And you can have such an interesting story if you just have like two characters who really care about each other. You're invested in these two. It's so much stronger to have that than focusing on like a huge cast of 20 people and it keeps fluctuating between them, at least in my perspective of
Yeah.
creating. And so for me, I really wanted to, honestly, I made these characters very heavily projecting onto them. Who
Uh
doesn't,
huh.
right? They're our characters, we do that. But for me, it was kind of like I really wanted to explore these ideas of these tropes and kind of mash them together. Like, what happens if you have these best friends who have this situation that kind of splits them apart, but brings them closer, but also not really?
Mm-hmm.
Or what more, like, what if you have to make them raise somebody or take care of someone who's so different from themselves and they have to come to that mutual understanding? A
Mm-hmm.
lot of my story is actually more focused on how these characters interact and they're very personal experience, because as much as there's that wider focus of the bigger world, the grand magic, the great universe, I wanted to pull it into something closer, something that a lot of us can relate to, that's just like friendships or the people, because that is ultimately what makes up, at least in my case, my world, is the people who make it up.
Yeah.
They're what really grounds me to this moment, and what really matters to me. Like, oh my god, having a fallout with a close friend does feel like your world is falling apart.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to pull into that, like really focus on just these three and how their world works, because I think that would help me as a creator even just understand what I was trying to get out of this story.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why it's just the three. I get a lot of things being like, oh, the other guys aren't really involved, and I was like, that's okay. It's kind of like, it's this is the main emphasis, is how these three are going to develop and grow amongst each other.
Yeah, because I think that, like, when you're telling a story, you have a limited economy of how much focus you can give to things, depending on the length. And even then, I think that a lot of times there's like a maximum depending on your style, and how you go about building your narratives. And here, the inner world that we're given the most access to is Sol, Lunik, and Mai.
Yes.
And the reason for that is, like you're saying, is to show their dynamic. And you mentioned, like, what is this experience like for Sol and Lunik to take care of someone? Mai is also pretty independent.
Yeah.
And, like the struggles of, and this is an assumption on my part, but Lunik strikes me as a character who is really comfortable when they're in control, when he
Yes.
has, when he knows what's going on. And
Absolutely. Oh, I'm so happy.
and that tension between him and Mai is not antagonistic, but
Mhm.
Mai Mai wants to have her own control.
Mhm.
And the tension that all three of them have with each other is not like anger. They're not like at each other's throats or anything, but they are all developing in their own way.
Yes.
And the way in which they're pinging off each other and making each other grow, even earlier in the story, like pretty quickly, I could see that dynamic, which was great because that let me know like where we're going, and I can see the
Yes.
path ahead, to some extent. Um, did they like? Did they have very different personalities before, and then as you started developing one, like, was Lunik first in terms of their character as they are now?
Oh my gosh. Actually, I was talking to another friend about this recently. So I actually dug up some of my very first test pages I did for
Mm-hmm.
Intercosmic. The style's totally different. The characters are different, the style is different, and it's kind of funny. The personalities for Sol and Lunik were weirdly enough kind of switched. So
Oh,
Lunik was the incredibly
interesting.
confident one, and he was like confident. He doesn't give a shit about anything. He's like, I'm the boss, I'm in control. And Sol is the one who's like, I want to be on time. I want to make sure everything's perfect. And it's this kind of funny switch where they've kind of switched roles. Like I felt like it was actually more organic for me to focus on. If anything, yes, I've projected onto these characters, and I've projected different parts of myself, like the parts that like I like to really be in control. That's the
Mm-hmm.
part that I put into Nick, like the idea that this he's a character that just really wants to be in control of the situation, wants to know what's happening next, and he likes the status quo. He likes things being predictable and
Mm-hmm.
on schedule, and very much like I know what the next day is going to look like because I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And Soul has become this other character that I also protect on, the part that really wants to try hard, the part that like is so approachable, but it's almost to a fault where it's like they lose sight of themselves because they're constantly looking out for the greater picture or something else. They're trying to fit this role that they've kind of lost sight of what they want.
Yeah.
And then Mai is just me being like, what if I just wrote a character that's like pure teenage thought that is just, I want to do my thing. I want to do whatever I want. I don't care about anybody. Nobody gets me. So Mai has actually surprisingly stayed pretty consistent
Yeah.
throughout the whole time. She's just been like I like to say it. She is the shonen protagonist. She is the
Yeah.
anime main
I
character,
could
you
see
know?
that. I could definitely see
Yeah,
that.
she's just like, I have my way of doing things, and that's how it's gonna get done.
Yeah.
I don't care what you guys say. And I was like, you know what? I personally, in my opinion, I want more. Whenever I watch a show, I want more girls be loud and messy and angry. So I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, that's gonna be her. She's just gonna be this kind of brat, but you're gonna come to love her somehow, some way.
That's
And then,
awesome.
oh, sorry.
No, no, I was just saying I love that. I think that that's I can see that in the work. And
Yeah,
it's really
I'm
cool.
so happy. Yeah, and then the others, I'll be honest, like they started off as, very simple like ideas. There's this cold character, there's the hot warm character. And then eventually as I kept writing them, I started giving them more, like I guess human aspects to myself, like that I thought of, like, oh, this one's actually very anxious. When I think about it, if I was this person in this position, I would want to feel like I have to be perfect all the time. I would want to try hard because so many people are relying on me. And that's how I got kind of to where Soul is now.
Yeah.
And Lunik is the other opposite side of me, which likes to think that, like, oh, you know what, if I was in that position and I was very happy with my friendships and everything, and then this person comes in and ruins everything, that's what I am projecting onto them because
Yeah.
like I think we've all been there.
Yeah.
Like the yeah, so and the idea that you're angry at you're angry because you don't have control, so you're gonna blame it on somebody. You're gonna blame it on. But in this case, he's gonna blame it on a child. He's gonna blame it on this literal child who has no control over her situation, and then he's
Hmm.
gonna be like, she's the reason my world's falling apart, and not viewing it as like a personal thing. Because even in my case, like growing up making this has been like a very big I don't know, personal growth, even me reflecting on my own actions as over the past few years. That's kind of what I'm projecting onto all of them.
Oh yeah. And I think that when you have these characters that are that are very quick to understand. Like where Soul is coming from. Um and
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that they are simple, but
Mm-hmm.
they are not they're not hiding a lot from the reader.
No.
They may be hiding things from each other, but
Mm-hmm.
um that does make it easy for you to like think through things with them. And I think that that's really fascinating. Like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, is it okay if I ask some like lore questions, kind of things?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Go for it.
So like the the whole stream that we've been running so far is Pride
Mm-hmm.
themed, and
Yes.
is there a term for the spirits? Because I've been calling them spirits because they don't identify themselves in any particular way that I remember. Of Sol and Lunik are
Yes.
I've called them elemental spirits to people.
Yes.
Um, do they have a term for themselves?
They kind of just call themselves cosmics. I have
Got you.
this funny
That's right.
yeah, yes. So they're kind of people have asked what the heck is that? And I'm like, oh, they're kind of like demigods, but not really.
Yeah, yeah. And
um
gotcha. And like I do think that one thing I do like is that that's not super important to the story. Like,
mm-mm.
um, and the amount of times that I've been talking to another person and been like, oh, the humans, I rarely do
Yes.
that. So that makes sense that they wouldn't. And I only need that term for this moment to ask about like how does queerness represent itself in cosmic society?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, this is very tightly focused. Your story is very much on Sol, Lunik, and Mai's like experience through this. And
Mm-hmm.
if you go like, I don't know, like that completely doesn't matter, because it's about their own queerness and like their
Mm-hmm.
own experiences. Have you thought about this? Have you touched on it, or have you mostly focused on these characters, your cast's experience with queerness?
It's kind of like this is again a funny theme that I'm going with is the reason I made them as like weird elemental people and not like people with powers is the biggest thing I want to mess around with is the idea that you are like quite literally, you aren't what you quote unquote are made of.
Yeah.
So that was like a huge, that physical element of whatever their emotions are experiencing. So you've got this cold, cool character who is made of ice. It makes sense. But
Yeah.
here's the concept of them, understanding that their foundation doesn't define who they are, or beyond that, that they can be very warm and loving
Hmm.
or very gentle. Like that idea is something that I really wanted to play with. That it's almost, I guess it sounds very wishy-washy. It's like, ooh, astral projecting there.
Well, no, I think I mean, that's important because, like, I think that there have been stories that I've absolutely loved where it is breaking down like what would gender terms be in another society? What would
Yes.
how would sexuality be defined? How would their gender be
Yes.
defined?
Yes.
And I think that it's easy to comprehend that if you switch out labels, if you
Mhm.
regroup things, if you
Mhm.
map our society onto another society.
Mhm.
But if these characters are seemingly immortal, or at least they live a long time, they
Yes.
have like a very elemental nature to themselves in terms
Yes.
of, what not only the elements that they have, but also like they're sort of expressions of emotion and like
Mhm.
particular emotions. Um,
Yes.
I could easily see someone like Lunic, like Mai would be like, here is all these sexualities that humans had, and Lunic being like, I gotta research this because I have no clue. Um, based on how their society is constructed and how they might relate to each other. Is that
Mhm.
true, or am I projecting a lot?
Oh, no, no, that's absolutely true. Honestly, again, one of the big reasons I made this was to kind of deconstruct that idea. I've actually been reading a lot more like sci-fi that kind of like falls into that kind of ambiguous genre of like exploring gender and sexuality. Like I read one book recently called Left Hand of Darkness by
Oh
Ursula
yeah,
Le Guin. Everybody knows that book, right?
yeah.
Come
Ursula
on,
K.
like
Le
that's
Guin is real good, and some
oh,
people
she's a
might who are listening to this,
fantastic.
but it's definitely a good book.
Yes, it's a great read. Oh, it's like the ending was sad, but it was one that like made me think like, oh, that's such a cool take. But it kind of was like what I was thinking, like the idea that like, this is a society that's totally different, that is different from what we had. It doesn't have that gender kind of construct. So whatever they are is whatever they are. It's just a different way of being, and that's okay. Like to be completely honest, like and I was kind of making these characters, I remember people would be like, "Oh, are these two girls or are they boys?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. They're made of fire and ice. Like they're
Yeah, yeah,
like it's just like a weird thing. It's like, I mean, I guess they both use he pronouns, I suppose. But if I really wanted to think in that way, honestly, if I one of the things I actually was talking to a friend about this recently too was that if I could retcon something big about my comic, and this is not something I talk about often, it's that I would really just strip them of all their pronouns.
yeah,
I would totally just do that because at this point, it's kind of so deep in the comic that I can't really just like re-edit all my pages. I could do it from here on forward. I have debated it, but I was like, it's because it. But I also didn't want to make the idea that like not having a he, she, her, him, her was like I don't know an alien concept either. So I didn't want to really step on any toes there.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, like I just wanted to play with the idea that these characters, their world to them, this kind of gender binary or this like even sexuality is just like it's not like a weird thing they have to slot themselves into. It's just
yeah.
they are. So if they feel one way or another, it's just how it is, and they accept
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I think that when it comes to the writing angle, I think that that can be hard to. There's a lot of balance there that I've seen that seems hard to like get across that like this society does not have these constructions, but they also do not like oppress those differences, or like they have different things that they're thinking about or a different perspective, and getting that across to the viewer so that they know is uh, is something that I've struggled with. Where like from what I
Mm.
know, and this is based on what I've understood so far, Steven Universe, I believe, the crew have a concept that all of the gems don't. I don't know if they have like a pronoun per se, but they have an expression. So like it's a bit complex from what I understand, and I'm speaking from, ignorance, but that because they are projections of light, they can change their expression of
Yes.
how they express their gender, and that
Yes.
complicates things or at least adds another layer. But I think that the show does a really good job of trying its best to get that across without stepping on anything or implying anything
Yes.
bad.
Yes.
Um,
I think Steven Universe has done like an incredible job in just terms of like paving the way for like understand like I don't know media that just doesn't like that can promote the idea that there isn't a binary to these two kind of things. I think
yeah,
they've done an incredible job.
yeah,
Steven
absolutely.
Universe is incredible.
And I think one of the things that Intercosmic has that's similar in that way is that you do have a character Mai who comes from. You can have Mai be the person who can voice the importance of, talking about your gender and identifying with your gender and finding strength in that,
Mm,
at the same time as having
mm.
a reflection of a different way. But I've never read Intercosmic and assumed or got the impression that you're sort of telling the reader that like these people are way better. Um, uh,
Yeah.
and I think that you've done a really good job of conveying that as best as you can. Um,
Oh gosh, thank you.
you're welcome. And like, I mean, when it comes to fantasy and speculative fiction and things like it's I really appreciate that within their cosmic you have such a setup where you can slowly change things if you want to, if it feels interesting to you. It's very quick to understand these characters, and that gives you more time to learn about those characters and to see
Mhm.
their journey, because I've been guilty in my own writing of I think it's from my comedy background, but having a thing that I hide until the end.
Yes.
And then really I should have just done it earlier, and then I can explore the after effects of that. Or, I know who Soul is right away. I don't have to read a lot in order to understand who Soul is. So that
Yes.
gives you the ability to see Soul, like where he's coming from. You can see where they're thinking, and then
Mhm.
bounce them off of something. Um,
Exactly.
and I think that that's really powerful, in the way that you've
Thank
built
you.
Intercosmic.
Oh gosh, thank you. I'm really flattered.
But like,
Yeah.
it's so we're coming close to the end now.
Oh
And
wow. Yeah.
uh is there anything that you would like to touch on when it comes to the world of Intercosmic, if someone's going to be getting into the comic? Anything that you tell people, or any question, like a common question that people have about Intercosmic?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think one of my favorite things is when people ask me about like colors. I just say I literally fun twist for everybody. I literally choose the character that is quote unquote predominant in that scene, and then I'm like, all right, that's gonna be the color of the scene.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So it's actually kind of a fun thing. I know so a lot of other shows might like all the obviously in my case, all the characters are very color coded.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a weird thing depending on how I art direct it, quote unquote art direct. That makes it sound so formal, as if I'm not just, pressing fill bucket at 3 a.m. Um, it's kind of like this, I don't know, it kind of adds this fun little detail. I always try to find a way to make it fun somehow to me, to make this, whether it's something silly like, oh, what if I did this one color thing here that hints to something happening 300 pages down the line? I'm gonna do that. And it's all about, for me, finding the fun little ways I can enjoy making this, whatever it is. Like that is so important to me, and I stress it enough. I mean, I've said it 600 times in this interview. Um, but yeah, like another big thing I always get is, I mean, I get my work gets compared to like literally everything, everything under the sun.
Hmm.
People will say like, this is this OC reminds me of this, or this OC reminds me of this, or this show reminds me of this. And I'm always like, hell yeah, it does. Why? Because I'm enjoying all of these things and I am making something purely indulgent. So
Hmm.
if it kind of feels tropey, it kind of feels campy, that's okay. I kind of want it to. I kind of want it to feel familiar. It's kind of an homage to a younger self. Um, and in terms of questions and like this whole comics process, I think I've always been very frank that my process of just creating has just to be as indulgent as possible because I want to enjoy what I'm making, but I also know that like it totally depends on like career and what you're doing with your life. It's kind of interesting that Intercosmic has actually been the thing that has been leading me to opportunities and like so many jobs. Like recently, I've been working in comics professionally now. It's kind of crazy. I never would have seen like I would have assumed this road would take me forever, but building this comic has really built that foundation for me. So I kind of just want to stress that like I don't know if I had to give comics advice, it's just to do your best, have fun, make it, enjoy every minute of it. It's so special to love what you do. So I really encourage you to find a healthy way to incorporate that into your life, whatever it is, whether it is taking time off for a little bit, going on hiatus, or, you know, retracking why you're making this in the first place, if that's what it takes.
Absolutely.
I'm going on a tangent here, but
No, no,
that's
that is
again like
important. It is definitely important, and I think that
something I,
I think it
yeah,
is nice to hear. It's good to
yeah.
hear.
And oh, the other question I get is, have you planned this forever? And I was like, I did plan it. I did write an outline, a full outline. And if Giselle ever listens to this, they will know that I will sometimes just be like, so here's my outline. It makes no sense after this point because my brain is just going on a tangent and it's kind of what it's gonna do.
Yeah,
Who knows how it's gonna go?
yeah.
And that's okay. That's a-okay. Like I think also a big thing for me is to not get super attached to what I'm making. Like don't look at my pages and say this is the top tier.
Yeah. Yeah, and that
Like
can be
just make
hard.
it. For
That
a
can
lot
be
of people, I think.
really hard.
Yeah. In terms of what to think about, I just kind of want to stress: have fun making comics, guys.
Yeah. And and on that note, where can people find you?
Yes, so you can always find me as Stripey Worm on everything, literally anything. It's I am not creative. It's just that name on everything. I'm also you can go to my name.com, KristinaLuu.com. That's my portfolio if you
Hmm.
care about that kind of thing. But if you just want to chat, I promise I do not bite. I love chatting with people and meeting folks. So you can always find me at Stripey Worm on any social media. I'm mostly active on Twitter, so that is
Hmm.
the best. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you
Yeah,
for
no
this
problem.
interview.
No, this has been lovely.
I hope to talk to you again sometime.
Yeah,
And
no.
so I'm going to say goodbye to everybody and
Hmm.
follow up and tell them about the stream tomorrow a little bit. So say goodbye to Christina, everyone.
Yeah. All right. I do want to say thank you for having me on board, Kevin. This
Mm-hmm.
has been an absolute joy. I have loved it. It's been so lovely to chat with you all. I hope, I don't know if this has been enlightening or just some nice background noise to whatever you're doodling. I hope you all have a lovely day. Thank you so much for having me. It's really such a pleasure. I've only been in Hiveworks for a short while, but you guys have been phenomenal. So
Oh,
I
I'm glad.
really, really appreciate like you guys have made the whole process of making webcomics like such a joy for me as a creator, and that means a lot to me. So thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so glad that we can support you. I'm so glad that we can help
Yeah,
get this story out there because I think it's wonderful.
yeah,
Well, I hope to chat with you again sometime, either on stream or
yes,
off. And
yes,
I hope that you have a good rest of your day. So goodbye,
yes.
Christina.
Best of luck, and hope the streams tomorrow go well.
Yep,
Goodbye,
me
everybody.
too. Bye. So, hello everyone. It's just us. Um, Tomorrow we are going to return for our streams. And here is a little link for in the chat for what that's going to look like.